Hello and welcome to Season 5 of my YouTube channel, Typology in Fiction Writing. Season 5 will essentially be a collection of all possible writing advice that I think will be of value to fiction writers, because I will always be giving the context of what psychological groups will benefit more from what advice. The foundation of Season 5 is 2 videos which will go deep into the psychological groups of the attractors and the impactors, as we call the people who express the cognitive functions of extroverted intuition and introverted sensing, as well as extroverted sensing and introverted intuition. If you want to know more about cognitive functions, I will give a brief recap here, but I really do recommend you watch my Season 1. There are some resources on what kind of writer you are and some advice too. This video is about how writers of the group of the attractors go about increasing the desirability of their fictional stories. I first want to give my own philosophy on writing advice. Since this is the first episode of Season 5, I kind of want to prime the season with that. Then we'll discuss the nature of desirability to give ourselves some foundational knowledge. Then we'll get to the main part and discuss what I call the systematic approach. And then we discuss some mistakes that are usually made by attractors because of their need to increase the desirability of their stories. And then I'll give examples of the systematic approach using the opening chapters of 3 books, 3 novels: Skyward by Sanderson, Half a World by Abercrombie, and Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. Alright, let's get the show on the road. Robert McKee's book on writing opens up with an interesting paragraph. Talented writers write badly only if they want to preach a message or explore their emotions. The others prioritize the audience's experience. In my research, I find that everybody can have a message to preach, although it is the introverted feeling users who are more likely to be overly optimistic about a principle they don't fully understand. And exploring emotions is mostly an extroverted feeling thing. Both correspond to a psychological need that you might have, depending on what psychological group you belong to. So as usual, whatever you want to write, if you want to write it, that's already a valid reason to write it. But if success and fame and money is somewhere on your list of priorities, then you need to learn how to please an audience. The problem is that many people, introverted feeling and extroverted feeling users, start out trying to preach without having the skill. Or they start out with an idea that they think will be super successful and they stick to it for a decade. My philosophy is this: train yourself to please an audience. Do that for 10 years. And then when you really have something to say, because then you will also have a lot more life experience and the chances that you have really something useful and something significant to say are increased. So after that, you will have the skill to say that thing in a way that makes it really effective and successful and makes it impact people, or it makes it connect to a lot of people. So in other words, just write whatever and try to have fun doing it, but also kind of try to turn it all into a serious novel, because you want to learn the process of how to make a novel and that you learn every stage of the process. Alright, so the nature of desirability. What is the nature of attractors with their extroverted intuition and introverted sensing functions? Attractors have a psychological need for their stories to be read and to connect to a large audience, because the story is only alive when it is being read. Whenever attractors talk about becoming better writers or writing a better story or improving a story, they primarily talk about increasing the desirability of their stories. As an attractor, nothing feels better than knowing people are reading your stories. They always want to connect to as many people as possible. Every skill or technique they acquire serves this purpose. In comparison, the impactors have a psychological need for their stories to really impact anyone reading them, even if it is just one reader, as long as it stays in that reader's memory for as long as possible. So if you're an impactor, then it's not about how many people can connect to your story, but how hard they will be impacted by it. And now let's talk about introverted sensing and the systematic approach. There is a lot to say about introverted sensing, and like I said, it's all in Season 1. For this video, all you need to know is that introverted sensing memorizes what you yourself have done, and it likes the comfort of repeat experiences as well as routine and repetition. Introverted sensing remembers the writing techniques you used and how successful they ended up being, because it remembers your reaction, your internal reaction to everybody else's feedback, to everybody else's response. And this can provide you with a pattern of success and failure, which over time leads to a refinement of your technique. For comparison, the extroverted sensing users are guided by the audience's reaction. They are connected to the audience's experience, and they always aim to get a better and better reaction. They don't really look for a system because they don't really like repetition so much and routine and comfort zone. They are more about trying out new things. They're more about finding new pieces of performance that they can incorporate into their own performance. They also don't really like to stay in the same genre or the same style. They always want to put their skill to the test and prove to themselves and everybody else that they can do everything. And that is why they don't like the systematic approach, because they don't want to do the same thing again and again. But introverted sensing users very much would just like to have a very good system that works again and again, and every time they use it, they gain the roughly same level of success. Because then basically when you have this system, all you gotta do is follow the system. Every time you go about fiction writing, you just press that I win button, you utilize your systems, and you have a guarantee for roughly the same level of success every single time. And then you basically don't have to leave your comfort zone. Your system is your comfort zone. What can be an expression of you trying to achieve desirability? Everything can fall under desirability as long as it makes your story more desirable, which means that the entire realm of performance, which is going to be the next video, falls under that umbrella. A good performance and suspenseful writing, everything that has to do with extroverted sensing, can make your story more desirable. This is why ultimately all writing advice aims at increasing desirability. You just need the experience to utilize it properly. And writing advice combined with a lot of experience result in a lot of systems. It's really just about you having a lot of routine and repetition and learning how to write a proper story and to basically systematize the whole process. And on the other hand, the impactors will have to learn a couple of tools and techniques and methods from the attractors if they want to increase their performance. And this is basically why I'm doing these videos, because everybody can learn from the other side. You just have to be aware of the fact that there are two sides and that you are in one of these sides, and what are your disadvantages and what are your advantages. And that is actually a perfect segue to the next point, which is the mistakes that writers make in the name of desirability. Number one, you can have too much faith in established systems and methods. While it is very clever to learn many methods and systems, you need to be sure that you don't place too much faith in these methods. Introverted sensing users tend to place a lot of faith in whatever they think will improve their story's desirability, because introverted sensing is the faith function, to the point that they allow systems and advice to dictate too much of their story. The systems and methods you learn should serve your vision and not the other way around. This, by the way, also means that you have to pay attention to what you read while you write. If you enjoy reading a book as an attractor, you will try to figure out why you enjoy it, and you will automatically want to learn techniques and systems the author used. You're thinking something like this: this author was able to connect to me, so now I want to learn what they know so that I can connect to other audiences. You automatically want to assimilate these methods and techniques and make your story more like that story that you just read. And that way you might be sacrificing your story or even your message or the authenticity of your characters or other elements, just for the sake of increasing its desirability. I personally have done this on many occasions, and it only led to me basically destroying a perfectly good story, just because I thought that this other story I just read is better than mine, so I have to do what they're doing so that my story can be just as good. This behavior stops at some point once you have learned enough methods and techniques and have enough experience to know how and when to utilize them. Some attractors avoid reading while they are writing for this very reason. Mistake number 2, predictability. There is a disadvantage here that you need to be aware of when it comes to the systematic approach, especially if you're an explorer, because cartographers aren't so much at risk of doing this. The cartographers always try to advocate for a specific value, which basically means they insist on something and then they're trying to get that done, and the systems and techniques that they learn, they're basically basically directed and focused on a specific target. And once that is accomplished, they might actually find a new value that they're trying to turn into an achievement, and for that they might have to learn new systems. So there isn't always the risk that their stories will become predictable, but with explorers, that risk is actually very present. The stories of explorers do tend to become very predictable because they don't really insist on anything in particular. They just want to entertain the audience. And for that, they develop systems for entertainment. And as soon as they have a good system, they're going to use it again and again. And so the stories are going to sound the same again and again. Good storytelling has surprising turns or a surprising way to tell something. Predictability means bored audiences. Even in genre writing, where there are some strong codes and even mandatory scenes, every writer will need to find a way to tweak the codes to make a fresh story. So don't forget to add unpredictability to your system. Mistake number 3, you just don't have the experience. The systematic approach often consists of several methods and techniques which all connect and interlock in some way. They require a lot of experience to be utilized correctly in order to achieve the desired efficiency and not to have the story feel off or obvious, predictable, tropey, cliche, and so many other things. You can't just learn a couple of systems and then you're set. No, you have to learn a lot of them, and you have to learn how they work together in concert. It takes a while for attractors to have sufficient mastery in the craft. It takes at least a decade, which is exactly what Brandon Sanderson said. You need to write for like 10 years and then you're basically a black belt, and then you can start thinking about being successful. Impactors, on the other hand, can muster the willpower to accomplish their desires despite a lack in experience. Their introverted intuition willpower pulls them toward a specific goal, and they research and acquire skills for the sole purpose of reaching that goal. And they pick up those skills very fast, but they also lose them quickly afterwards as well. Attractors are only ever as good as their experience. The stories of attractors fail primarily because they lack the life experience and the experience as a writer, which means they don't have proper systems or they're not using them properly. Now let's go for some examples for the systematic approach. When we talk about desirability, we have to look at the differences between cartographer writers and explorer writers. I just mentioned in the point of predictability that the cartographer writers do tend to insist on specific elements or like on a message or a value that they wish to advocate, and they learn systems and methods to achieve those values. But the explorers are the ones who are way more likely to repeat and develop really powerful systems for entertainment because they project their own introverted sensing need for enjoyment onto the audience. And with their extroverted feeling, they believe that the audience values entertainment and they want to provide that value for them. This is why explorers are the kings of entertainment, and they create the best systems for entertaining writing, especially romance and science fiction. So if you want to know how to cultivate investment, learn from explorer writers. And that is exactly what we'll be doing right now. I will give you 3 examples of first chapters written by explorer writers who have mastered the systematic approach. You will notice that in these first chapters there will be layer after layer of investment and enjoyment and tension and curiosity and just everything that makes a story desirable. It is highly concentrated because these writers have systems. Let's start with Skyward by Brandon Sanderson. The prologue to this book is one of the best I've ever seen. It is just perfect. Skyward is a young adult science fiction novel about a young girl who aims to become a fighter pilot because in her culture, fighter pilots are absolute rock stars. All mankind is basically living in caves on a distant planet and is totally cut off from the rest of human civilization, and these people only come to the surface to fight aliens that try to bomb them. Skyward introduces the main character Spencer and her father right away. They climb from deep down in the caves up to the surface, which establishes the world right away. Additionally, Spencer and her dad are being introduced, and their relationship is developed in a way that also tells us everything important about Spencer. Spencer adores her father, who is a very skilled and courageous fighter pilot himself, and that's why he's beloved by everyone. Because of him, Spencer has the dream of becoming an awesome fighter fighter pilot as well, because then she would just be as beloved by everyone as her father is. The two of them climb to the surface when the aliens attack. We hear a radio conversation between her father and his wingmate, during which the wingmate says they have to retreat below the ground. But Spencer's dad answers, "We have to make a stand or we'll never get another chance." This is very important for later. So he runs to the outpost and gets into a plane and joins the fight. And Spencer watches from the ground, and then she leaves because it's kind of dangerous. And then a couple hours later, when she arrives down in the caves with her friends, she learns that something has happened that flipped everything upside down. But we don't know exactly what happened. All we know is that Spencer's dad has allegedly fled the fight. He was shot down by his wingmates because he was a coward who fled the fight, and she is now branded the daughter of a coward. So that already doesn't make sense. We know he's not a coward, so there is some missing information here. But that missing information alone wouldn't be enough. It's just a mystery. So why is this mystery so important? On the one hand, because it is the mystery of how her dad died. Obviously, we want to know how a person dies if they're close to us. But this is actually more than that. Because it has been established that Spencer wants to be beloved by everyone, just like her father was. And now, because of this incident, she is branded the daughter of a coward. So she has a really hard time growing up. We automatically know that Spencer's life is gonna be hell because of what happened. And we also know that it's all a lie. This is a huge injustice which she has to suffer. In other words, we absolutely want to find out what the hell happened. And this is the nature of the systematic approach. Everything is aimed at making the audience want to read the entire book right now. There is injustice, there is a mystery, and there is huge emotional investment. When I read this prologue the first time, I wanted to know how it ends right away. Okay, the second one, Half the World by Joe Abercrombie. This is an absolutely amazing first chapter. This book starts off with a basic piece of world building and character backstory. 16-year-old Thorn is an amazing Viking fighter, but she is a girl, and she isn't allowed to go on raids with the other men because she's a girl. The story starts with her partaking in a combat test with all the other young men that want to go on a Viking raid, and she absolutely crushes her opponent, who is a bit of a wuss, and he will later be her travel companion, so the story introduces two main characters here right away. Very good. Good job, Joe Abercrombie. But anyway, the man overseeing the combat test doesn't judge her on merit, but on gender. He really doesn't want a girl to be part of these Viking raids, so he does everything he can to make her lose the test. And from there, Joe Abercrombie just adds more and more layers of injustice. The man makes Thorn's test much more difficult than for the others. She has to fight 3 guys at the same time. During that fight, one of the men gets accidentally killed by Thorn. And the overseer, however, isn't shocked, but he's happy at that, because he now names her a murderer and exiles her, thus achieving his goal of preventing a woman from joining the raids. This a-hole is clearly a bad person, but he is in charge, and he destroys Thorn's dream and exiles her. And somehow Viking society in the story allows this. So you see, everything about this prologue increases the emotional investment. It makes sure that the reader absolutely wants to finish the story, so we see that justice will be served. Abercrombie even put another layer of emotion on top of it all, because when the 3 guys were made to fight Thorn, one of them protested and called out the injustice of it, and it is that one who Thorn accidentally got killed. So there's even another potential layer of guilt and injustice, because she probably cared more about the guy that she killed than this a-hole of an overseer. Naming her a murderer is like the height of hypocrisy. Alright, so now let's get to Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. I gotta be honest, I didn't make it past chapter 2, but that doesn't matter here because I want to point out the brilliance of how Yarros has constructed chapter 1. It is filled with so much expertly executed setup and payoff, and it raises the tension so fast that one immediately knows that they can trust this author. She establishes her authority as a storyteller. So to all the critics of this book, yes, there is technical stuff to learn here, not just spice. It starts with Violet, a weak and pathetic scribe, getting told by her tyrannical mother, who is a general at the war college, that she has to go up on a very slim and narrow parapet to cross a deadly drop and enter this war college, where a deadly competition is encouraged and the weakest get killed off pretty fast. The crossing of the parapet is pretty deadly because of rain and wind, and 15% of people already die just crossing killing it. Violet has crappy shoes and very disadvantageous clothing that would catch the wind. Violet's sister is there. She's an experienced dragon rider and gives Violet dragon rider clothing and rubber shoes, which grip the parapet better. She also tells Violet not to make friends and to stay away from this Xaden guy, because he has a huge incentive to try and kill her on sight, because Violet's mother has killed someone from his family. So Violet goes to that parapet and walks up. She immediately befriends two people. One of them, Dylan, just left his beloved girl to whom he wants to propose after 3 years at the War College are over. The other one is Rhiannon, a woman who befriends Violet, but she has bad shoes, so Violet gives her one of her good shoes, so that she can safely cross the parapet and not die. Now, they climb the stairs to the parapet and Dylan crosses over first. Violet then sees this dude and he is super hot, and we learn right away that it is Xaden, the guy who would kill her as soon as he knows who she is. So we got the enemies to lovers trope, which is obviously the juiciest trope ever. And the next thing that happens is that Rhiannon says Violet's name, which outs her in front of Xaden, who has this huge incentive to kill her, which is immediately payoff to what her sister said: don't befriend anyone. However, Xaden notices the rubber shoes, one on Violet and the other one on Rhiannon. So he understands one helped the other by sharing. But which one? This is where the Black Rider outfit comes in. Since Violet wears this superior outfit, which Xaden concludes comes from her sister, he can also conclude that the shoes came from her sister as well, and that Violet shared her shoes with Rhiannon. And that's another payoff, because Xaden decides to spare Violet because of her kindness and esprit de corps. And then Dylan slips and dies, and Violet is shocked and realizes, okay, that's why I shouldn't make friends and get involved in everybody's backstory, because people die. So as you can see, in Fourth Wings Chapter 1, we see the systematic execution of setup and payoff. The tension goes right up to 100 from the start. Alright, that's it. There will be a video for the Impactors that is similar to this one, but apart from those two videos, Season 5 will be filled with all sorts of writing advice, techniques and systems, and I will try to mention for each of them what quadra this advice is especially good for. I hope I'll see you then. Because he has a huge incentive.